Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more esoterica. Today we are beginning a brand new study, and normally this would be where we would do the groundwork video, but that's going to be covered by the topic today, so I'm going to take just a minute to reintroduce myself to those of you who are definitely going to be brand new here today. I hold some unconventional beliefs. My name is Pitt, and I hold some unconventional beliefs. There will be several playlists linked in the corner above and in the box down below, which will explain those beliefs in greater detail if you should so desire. I have already pissed off most of the people out there. It is one of those things that I do fairly well. I pissed off the Christians because I read through their book and I saw what it said, and it is not what they think it says. I read through several source materials in esoterica. We've done Rudolf Steiner, we've done G.R.S. Mead, we've done Madame Blavatsky, and I've pissed off people all along the way because I have a little bit of knowledge, right? I don't claim to be a master, but I am absolutely an adept in the topics of discussion. I have healed myself. I have used the electromagnetic forces of creation, which is the Holy Spirit, in order to heal myself in my throat. I am able to talk to you right now because of that. I've healed my back, I've healed my shoulder, I am in the process of healing my leg. I do not talk from an area of ignorance. This is something that I have put into practical application, and the things that I talk about is clarifying that. We do these studies so that we can have a launching off point for several discussions about the topics that are contained within the text. It is not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it. So you're more than welcome to tag along as we begin this exploration. Just know that going into it, if you are firm in your beliefs, if you are happy in the things that you already know, you probably will not find any value whatsoever in my particular discussion. But if you've got questions, if you are wondering, does this actually work? Is this necessary? That is the biggest question that we answer along the way. Then you might find some value. If you have an open mind and you're able to accept new information, whether or not it contradicts what you already think that you know, you will find value here. But if you are firm in your beliefs, or if you are happy, you almost certainly will not. I will almost certainly step on your toes. And it is not something that I do intentionally, and it is not something which I apologize for. I am here to discern things which are true from things which are speculative. Many of the things contained in here are probably true. There is almost certainly going to be some things which are speculative, and therefore we're going to delineate between the two. Once again, I'm not talking from an area of ignorance. I have put into practical application the things which we are talking about here, and if you would like to know how I did that, there's a link for my book, also contained in the description box along with this source material, where I explain the process by which I came to the realization and the practice by which I began and the results from which I have received. And so if you're interested, there is a link. With that being said, we are going to dive in and begin a brand new exploration. This is Transcendental Magic. It is better known as Dogma and Ritual. It is by Eliphas Levi. And we're going to read the biological preface, which will be taking place of what I normally do as a groundwork video. I was unaware that this was going to be done by Mr. White, who, if you were unaware, is the guy who came up with the design for the tarot cards. All right, biological preface. Eliphas Levi Zahed is a pseudonym which was adopted in his occult writings by Alphonse Louise Constant, and it is said to be the Hebrew equivalent of that name. Now, that is already going to let me know a couple of things. First off, if you're changing your name, you're probably not doing things correctly, right? Now, what do you mean? Names change all the time. No, they really don't. If you are changing your name, it is probably because you're trying to hide something from your past. And I'm unfamiliar with his past, but secondly, if you are aligning yourself with the Hebrew, then you're also probably doing something wrong. We have spent an awful lot of time. There are 162 videos in the Bible study, and we found through that almost everything that is contained in the Old Testament is directly contradictory with the Old Testament. And so if you are basing anything belief system upon the Hebrew, you are almost certainly doing it wrong. The author of the Dogma et Rituel de la Haute Magique was born in humble circumstances about the year 1810, being the son of a shoemaker, giving evidence of unusual intelligence at an early age. The priest of his parish conceived a kindly interest for the obscure boy and got him on the foundation of Saint Sulpice, where he was educated without charge and with a view to the priesthood. He seems to have passed through the course of study at that seminary in a way which did not disappoint the expectations raised concerning him. In addition to Greek and Latin, he is believed to have acquired considerable knowledge of Hebrew, though it would be an error to suppose that any of his published works exhibit special linguistic attainments. He entered on his clerical novitiate, took minor orders, and in due course became a deacon, being thus bound by a vow of perpetual celibacy. Shortly after this step, he was, and we'll go ahead and hit this now. If any of your belief systems is making you take a vow of celibacy, it is doing it wrong. And generally speaking, if you are voluntarily participating in a vow of secrecy or celibacy, you are doing it wrong, right? You are not meant to exclude the vices. You are meant to overcome the vices. That means having sex in a healthy way, not throwing your penis into anything that moves, but finding that special someone with whom you are to share your soul. You are not meant to be celibate. You are not meant to be poor. You are not meant to give up meat, bread, or the worldly temptations. You are meant to assimilate them, to find the balance within yourself between the virtues and the vices, right? Lust and chastity, virtue, vice, you're supposed to find the balance. Greed, charity, find the balance, right? You are supposed to find balance in your life, not exclusion, almost ever. Very few things are to be excluded. There are exceptions to the rule, but you are probably not that exception. Most of the people who live a celibate life or a life of asceticism are actually living a prideful life. They are better than you because they have this discipline that you don't. I only eat bread and water. I am better than you. I don't have sex. I am better than you. I have no possessions. I am better than you. Is pride. And pride is the key to the fall. Back to the text. Shortly after this step, he was suddenly expelled from St. Sulpice for holding opinions contrary to the teaching of the Roman Catholic Church. Oh, he must have read the Bible then, right? If you read the Bible as it is written and still hold with the Roman Catholic Church, you are again doing it wrong. The existing accounts for this, and that is also true for most of the Protestant denominations, right? Well, actually all of them. Right? If you have read through the Bible, like I'm firmly of the opinion that there are only two types of pastors, right? There are the ones that are too dumb to read it and understand it, and there are the ones that do read it, do understand it, and lie to you. That is pretty much the only two types of pastors that there are. The main reason people leave the seminary is not because of financial reasons, and it's not because they can't keep up with the coursework, but rather because they lose their faith through studying the Bible. There's a reason for that. Check out the Bible study. It will let you know what those reasons are. The existing accounts of this expulsion are hazy and incorporate unlikely elements, as, for example, that he was sent by his ecclesiastical superiors to take duty in country places, where he preached with great eloquence what, however, was doctrinally unsound. But I believe that there is no precedent for the preaching of deacons in the Latin Church. Pending the appearance of the Biography, which has been for some years promised in France, we have few available materials for a life of the Abbé Constant. In any case, he was cast back upon the world with the limitations of priestly engagements, while the priestly career was closed to him, and what he did or how he contrived to support himself is unknown. By the year 1839, he had made some literary friendships, including that of Alphonse Louise, the forgotten author of a fantastic romance entitled The Magician. We will check out this footnote. Let's see what that says. M. Papals, a contemporary French occultist in an extended study of the doctrine of Eliphas Levi, asks scornfully, "Who now remembers anything of Paul Augenis or Esquirios, journalists pretending to initiation and posing as professors of the occult sciences in the salons they frequented?" No doubt they are forgotten, but Eliphas Levi states in the Histoire de la Magie that by the publication of his romance of The Magician, Esquiros founded a new school of fantastic magic, and gives sufficient account of his work to show that it was in parts excessively curious. A fantastic romance entitled The Magician, and Esquiros introduced him to Ganot, a distracted prophet of the period who had adopted the dress of a woman, abode in a garret, and there were preached a species of political illuminism, which was apparently concerned with the restoration of le vrai légitimite. Now, there are a couple things to talk about here, right? This apparently was a book that did not receive wide known, but he received some inspiration from it, so that's good. The other thing is that he was introduced to Ganot, a distracted prophet of the period who had adopted the dress of a woman. Lets you know right off the bat that he is mentally not sound, right? I know that is an extremely controversial statement. I just stepped on all kinds of toes, especially in this particular group who is going to be watching this. You have to accept facts as facts. Now, if you just want to dress however you want to dress, I don't give two shits. I could care less whether you run around in a dress or whether you run around in pants or whether you run around in shorts or whether you run around naked. For the most part, as long as you're not in front of children or people who are unwilling to participate, I don't care what you do with your body. But if you are thinking that you are in the wrong body, you are wrong. You were not put in the wrong body. There is no need to mutilate your genitalia in order to fit into your life. Your life was designed for you to have the genitalia that you were born with and to fully embrace that. And any deviation from that is a sign of mental illness. Back to the text. Told you I was going to step on your toes. He was, in fact, a second incarnation of Louis. Come on, son. 17th. Come back to earth for the fulfillment of a work of regeneration. There is no need for anything like that to happen, right? I do not doubt that reincarnation is a possibility. However, it is extremely misunderstood. You came from somewheres. That somewheres was the divine source. You will return to somewheres when you are done with your 5D navigational device. When you are done on this mortal coil, your soul will vacate the premises and will return to the exact same place that it came from. You, your soul, is the individualized spark of divinity set out for you to navigate 5D space in this temple. That is how it works, right? There is no need, ever, for anyone to be reincarnated to fulfill anything that has already happened, right? Or to give greater clarification. Now, it is entirely possible that your soul, when it goes back to where it comes from, makes the choice to come back here, right? You have not learned all of the lessons that you were meant to learn, and therefore, you decide to come back here. In that case, you once again get the amnesia, right? We are here with amnesia. We don't remember where we came from, although you did come from somewhere, and you can discover that through meditative practices. And so, there is no need for Louis XVII to be reincarnated to come back to the earth for the fulfillment of a work of regeneration. If Louis XVII was meant to fulfill the work of regeneration, then he would have done that prior to his disincorporation. It is entirely possible that the same soul is reincorporated, but if it is, you will not know. There is no test that you can give. There is no greater understanding that this soul is going to have. And anybody who thinks that that's a thing is trying to find that thing. And yes, I am talking directly to the Dalai Lamas and the Buddhas and all of those people out there who are looking for very specific reincarnations. You are wrong. Told you them toes are going to hurt today. Constant and Esquirios, who had visited him for the purpose of scoffing, were carried away by his eloquence and became his disciples. That means that you were probably a little bit weak-minded. Some element of socialism must have combined with the Illuminism of the visionary, and this appears to have borne fruit in the brain of Constant, taking shape ultimately in a book or pamphlet entitled The Gospel of Liberty, to which a transient importance was attached, foolishly enough, by the imprisonment of the author for a term of 6 months. All right, so, hold up. Is this dude a socialist? Is that what's going on? And y'all are taking wisdom from a socialist? Playlists. Right? We've done Karl Marx. We have done Bertrand Russell. We read through their works and dismissed them as fucking foolish for obvious reasons from the text. Right? Off the top, again, just like if you are thinking you were born in the wrong body, you have a little bit of a problem. In the exact same way, if you think that socialism, communism, or anarcho-capitalism can be attainable and a good thing, you got a little bit of the touch going on, right? And I don't care who you are. It does not matter to me if you hold degrees. It does not matter to me if something has been written down for 6,000 years. If it is stupid, it is stupid. And that is regardless of your situation, right? Socialism is stupid. For a variety of reasons that we're not going to dive into here, but it is. And anybody that can be influenced by it and not overcome it, right? He may have discounted it, right? He may have turned away from it. I don't know. In that case, okay, you gained a little bit of wisdom, just like I did when I did the Bible study and I understood that everything was not what I thought. There was a time when I thought anarcho-capitalism could work. I was dumb. I was stupid. Anybody who thinks that that is a possibility is stupid in the exact same way. I am not degrading you. Stupid is a temporary condition. It is like ignorance. It can be fixed. It just takes a little bit of work. Back to the text. There is some reason to suppose that Esquiros had a hand in the production, and also in the penalty. His incarceration over Constant came forth undaunted, still cleaving to his prophet, and undertook a kind of apostolic mission into the provinces, addressing the country people and suffering, as he himself tells us, persecution from the ill-disposed. I missed this. I didn't see it up there. The footnote is, a woman who was associated with this mission was, in like manner, supposed to have been Marie Antoinette. And again, that is that reincarnation fallacy. All right, we have another footnote here. A Victoria story, which has received recently some publicity in Paris, charges Constant with spreading a report of his death soon after his release from prison, assuming another name, imposing upon the Bishop of Evo, and obtaining a license to preach and administer the sacraments in that diocese, though he was not a priest. He is represented as drawing large congregations to the cathedral by his preaching, but at length the judge who had sentenced him unmasked the impostor, and the sacrilegious farce was thus terminated dramatically. Okay, so what do we have here? We have exactly what I said was going to happen in the first line, right? You got something to hide. That's why you change your name. It is not because you have reached spiritual enlightenment. What seems to be unfolding here is a con, right? A long game con, but still a con, right? This guy thought that he was going to strike it by the church. And apparently he held some ideals that were not in line with the church. That's easy to do. The church does not have very good ideals. And so he went out and through false pretenses misrepresented himself, right? That gives me con all the way through. Now, that does not mean that there cannot be wisdom contained in this book, right? Solomon did not write the Proverbs. He collected them. He got information from other people, put it in a book, and everybody considers him to be the wisest man to ever walk the earth because he collected other people's wisdom. It can be the exact same thing here, right? I have done something along those lines myself. I have synthesized other beliefs into something that actually works in a applicable manner. It's entirely possible that he did the same thing here. But what we are getting through this so far is deceit. Deceit is never a good thing. But the prophet ceased to prophesy, presumably for want of an audience, and la vraie légitimité was not restored. So the disciple returned to Paris, where, in spite of the pledge of the diaconate, he effected a runaway match with Mademoiselle Noemi, a beautiful girl of 16. And I'm assuming that he was not 16, and we will go ahead and point out that morality back in this day was not the same as morality today. This was the late 1800s. My own mom in the 70s got married at 14. Right? It was a different time, a different morality than we currently have. The predilection towards the young people, to me, is again another one of those, whoa, wait a minute, right? I am a full-grown man. Right? Even when I was 35, a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old, an 18-year-old, a 19-year-old, a 20-year-old has no appeal for me. None whatsoever. They are not on the level to hold a conversation. I don't care what your body looks like. If you can't think, we are not in the same area, right? I am not attracted to the youth. That is a big deal. That is something that you should pay attention to in your company. If somebody is talking about some girl of 16, there's a problem there. Back to the text. This lady bore him 2 children who died in tender years, and subsequently she deserted him. Her husband is said to have tried all expedients to procure her return, footnote, including black magic and pacts with Lucifer, according to the silly calumnies of his enemies. Alright, so this might be slander, but if it is not, I'm going to let you know right now that this is exceedingly stupid. Right? In the exact same way, right? You are making a deal with an entity that you do not understand. Black magic is not to be trifled with. There is a prominent YouTuber right now who is definitely trifling with it and definitely receiving the effects of it. He thought he understood it. He has put out numerous books on the occult, and yet he is reaping the very predictable rewards for the very predictable things that he did associated with black magic. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, Styx Hexenhammer, 666. He is reaping the rewards of the magic that he practiced. It is quite literally manifesting itself in his life, and yet he does not understand that. It is wild to me. Black magic pacts with entities, remarkably stupid, right? If you are trying to suborn someone's free will, if you are trying to impact someone in a negative manner, those things will be reflected back to you. There are 8 laws of creation. I will link that particular video in the beginning, or in the corner up here. There are 8 laws of creation, and one of them is the laws of return, and you will receive back what you put out there. And if you are putting out, I want this person to not have their free will, guess what you're going to get back? If you're putting out there, I want this person to have negative consequences, guess what you are going to get back? Exactly what you're putting out there, multiplied by your intentions and returned upon you with a guarantee. That is something that will happen. If you are doing black magic to influence someone or to put harm upon them, you will get it back. They probably will not even feel the effects. That is a guarantee. That is quite literally how the mechanics work. Be exceedingly careful. That is why we're doing this study. Alright, back to the text. Tried all expedients to procure her return, but in vain, and she even further asserted her position by obtaining a legal annulment of her marriage on the ground that the contracting parties were a minor and a person bound to celibacy by an irrevocable vow. So she was a minor according to their morality too? And an irrevocable vow. You be very careful with the vows that you speak. That is something that you should absolutely pay attention to. It is better to say yes or no than it is to make a vow. The lady, it may be added, had other domestic adventures, ending in a second marriage about the year 1872. Madame Constant was not only a very beautiful, but exceedingly talented, and after her separation, she became famous as a sculptor, exhibiting at the Salon and elsewhere, under the name of Claude Vigny. It is not impossible that she may still be alive, in the sense of her artistic genius, at least. She is something more than a memory. At what date Alphonse Louise Constant applied himself to the study of the occult sciences is uncertain, like most other epochs of his life. The statement on page 142 of this translation, that in the year 1825 he entered on a fateful path which led him through the suffering to knowledge, must not be understood in the sense that his initiation took place at that period, which was indeed early in boyhood. It obviously refers to his enrollment among the scholars at St. Sulpice, which, in a sense, led to suffering, and perhaps ultimately to science, as it certainly obtained him education. The episode of the New Alliance, so Ghanaian termed his system, connects with transcendentalism, at least on the side of hallucination, and may have furnished the required impulse to the mind of the disciple. But in 1846 and 1847, certain pamphlets issued by Constant under the auspices of the Librairie Societaire and the Librairie Palestinienne show that his inclinations were still towards socialism, tinctured by religious aspirations. How wild is that? Not only are you going to have socialism, which is, by the way, one singular person in charge of a controlled economy, right? That is socialism wrapped up. One tyrant saying where everything has to be spent or bought from. That is socialism. Tinctured by religious aspirations. Now, one of the very first things that happens whenever socialism rolls out is they kill all of the people who believe in God, right? If you have very firm religious beliefs, they don't want you around. You will be in direct opposition to socialism because there is no other choice, right? If you believe in religious freedom, the freedom of thought or the freedom of action, you are intricately disposed to not support socialism. You are the antithesis of it. If you believe in freedom, life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness, socialism has no part in your life, and religious aspirations lead you to seek those things. And so they are directly against socialism, communism, and yes, anarcho-capitalism. And so it is wild that he was socialist with religious aspirations. Those two things do not go together at all. The period which intervened between his wife's desertion, footnote, I must not be understood as definitely attaching blame to Madame Constant for the course she adopted. Her husband was approaching middle life when he withdrew her, still a child, from her legal protectors, and the runaway marriage, which began by forswearing, was, under the circumstances, little better than a seduction, thinly legalized, and it was afterwards not improperly dissolved. There's a lot in that statement, isn't there? Listen to this. Approaching middle life when he found this 16-year-old, right? What's middle life? Let's give him 80, right? So 40 years old? 40 years old and a 16-year-old? Right? It might be 65. That would still be 32 and a half. That's double her age. That's creepy, bruv. What are you doing, man? Right? And he withdrew her, still a child, from her legal protectors and the runaway marriage. Man, you as bad as Abraham. At least it wasn't your sister. But I mean, other than that, what are you doing? That is enough to discount many of the things that he will say, right? Again, he can collect knowledge from other people, but if this is the course that your life is taking, you don't have wisdom. Right? You can get it from somewhere else, but that doesn't mean it belongs to you. The period which intervened between his wife's desertion and the publication of the Dogma de la Haute Magie in 1855 was that, probably, which he devoted less or more to occult study. In the interim, he issued a large dictionary of Christian literature, which is still extant in the encyclopedia series of the Abbé Mignet. This work betrays no leanings towards occult science, and indeed no acquaintance therewith. That is because he is an extremely deceitful person. We can see that already. Right? This guy is exceedingly deceitful. What it does exhibit, unmistakably, is the intellectual insincerity of the author. For he assumes therein the mask of perfect orthodoxy, and that accent in matters of religion which is characteristic of the voice of Rome. What did I tell you about the types of pastors that there are? There's only two types. The ones that can't figure it out and the ones that have and are lying to you. That's it. The Dogma de la Haute Magie was succeeded in 1856 by its companion volume of the Ritual, both of which are here translated for the first time into English. It was followed in rapid succession by the Histoire de la Magie, 1860, Le Clef des Grands Mysteries, 1861, a second edition of the Dogma et du Rituel, to which a long and irrelevant introduction was unfortunately prefixed. 1862, Fables and Symbols, 1864. Les Sociétés de Meudon, a beautiful pastoral idyll impressed with the cachet cabalistique, and Les Sons d'Esprit, 1865. The last two works incorporate the substance of the pamphlets published in 1846 and 1847. The precarious existence of Constant's younger days was, in one sense, but faintly improved by his age. His books did not command a large circulation, but they secured him admirers and pupils. People will fall for anything. From whom he received remuneration in return for personal or written courses of instruction. He was commonly to be found in chez Louis, in a species of magical vestment, which may be pardoned if a French magus, and his only available portrait, prefixed to this volume, represents him in that guise. There are no special clothing that you have to wear to perform magical, right? I have done magic, right? Both internal and external. See the book. I have affected things within myself and without of myself. There is no need for any ceremonies. There is no need for any intervention by any entity, and there is no need for any of the tools. You can do all of it without the tools. What do you mean tools? Wands, athames, crystals, cups, water, like any of those things. You don't need them. Now, they can be handy, right? I have tools, right? This is a clearing stone. It is for the third eye. You can tell by the color. I have several others on this shelf right here, right? I use tools all of the time, but they have no intrinsic value by themselves. They are merely focuses. Any clothing that you wear is a focus, but it is irrelevant in the large scale of things. You can do it naked. People do. Or you can dress yourself up ornately. People do. Either way, it is exactly the same amount of effective. It doesn't matter if you're under the moon. It doesn't matter if you're under the sun. It doesn't matter what day it is. It doesn't matter where the planets are. All of that is completely irrelevant. That is from my own magical practice, which has received results. Right? I'm not talking about other people's knowledge. I am talking about the knowledge that I hold. The knowledge that was given to me and I have used effectively, right? If you go back through my videos, a lot of you are going to be brand new today. If you go back through my videos, you can see the change happen. About a year, maybe a year and a half ago now, I decided to walk this particular path, and I asked for healing, and I received the ability to heal myself, and it worked. Right? I had a cyst in my throat. I was unable to talk for 15 minutes at a time. That was an exceedingly difficult thing to do. I wasn't able to vary my voice. I couldn't talk in any other tone than the one I had. That is different. The cyst is gone. I had surgery on this shoulder 20 years ago, and it never was quite right. I had 80% function. I have healed that. I now have 100% function in this shoulder. I have several injuries in my back, seven bulges, 6 herniations, 3 spinal impingements, scoliosis, stenosis, and degenerative disc disorder, which I am healing. These are things that are physically trackable. You can see them happen. You don't need any of the tools. You don't have to dress in any specific way. You don't have to call upon any specific name. You go to God and meditation and prayer and fasting, and you will receive it. There is no need to have any special tools, any special ritual, or any initiation in order to do the things that I have done. That is me telling you as plainly as possible that many of the things that are going to be contained in here are probably going to be wrong, right? Dogma and ritual aren't necessarily necessary. Back to the text. He outlived the Franco-German War, and as he had exchanged socialism for a sort of transcendentalized imperialism, that's the exact same thing. What do you mean, Pitt? Imperialism and socialism are just another word for the same thing, right? I've got a video where I did this, right? Then it was feudalism, right? Feudalism and imperialism are pretty close. They're almost exactly the same. Now, the only difference is imperialism just implies that the emperor is the ruler, whereas in feudalism you had dukes and earls and all of that, and they ruled somewhat independently. But it breaks down to the exact same thing, right? The one guy in charge of everything. That is tyranny, right? If only one person is making the decision for everyone, that's tyranny. Now, we don't have that here. We have a president, and if he was alone, it would be tyranny. But he's not. We have the Congress and the Senate, which offset that completely. That is not tyranny, right? That is dispersal. That is more towards the free than the controlled. You only have two types of government and a variety between them. It is a sliding scale, control or free will. Now, the balance in the middle, that's where most things are good, right? You have people making laws to prevent harm, right? If we didn't have laws and regulations, our drinking water would be undrinkable. Our air would be unbreathable. That is indisputable. But there are regulations beyond the need. There are many things that are beyond the pale. And so you should have a balance. You should have as much freedom as possible to prevent harm from others. There should be a balance. There should not be one guy in charge, ever. Imperialism is exactly the same as socialism. It is one guy in charge of a controlled market. In the empire, the emperor says who you can trade with. The emperor says whether you can trade. That is something we are completely different from. Socialism, imperialism, feudalism, all exactly the same. Transcendentalized imperialism. His political faith must have been as much tried by the events which followed the siege of Paris as was his patriotic enthusiasm by the reverses which culminated at Sedan. His contradictory life closed in 1875 amidst the last offices of the church which had almost expelled him from her bosom. He left many manuscripts behind him which are still in course of publication, and innumerable letters to his pupils. Baron Spitaleri alone possesses 9 volumes, have been happily preserved in most cases, and are in some respects more valuable than the formal treatises. No modern expositor of occult science can bear any comparison with Eliphas Levi. And among ancient expositors, though many stand still higher in authority, all yield to him in living interest, for he is actually the spirit of modern thought, forcing an answer for the times from the old oracles. Whoo-wee, that's a big one. Hence, there are greater names, but there is no influence so great, no fascination in occult literature exceeds that of the French magus. The others are surrendered to specialists, and the typical serious student to whom all dull and unreadable masterpieces are dedicated, directly or not. But he is read and appreciated, much as we read and appreciate new and delightful verse which, through some conceit of the poet, is put into the vesture of chaussee. Indeed, the writings of Eliphas Levi stand, as regards the grand old line of initiation, in relatively the same position as the earthly paradise of Mr. William Morris stands to the Canterbury Tales. There is the recurrence to the old conceptions, and there is the assumption of the old drapery, but there is in each case the new spirit, the incommunicable axiom, and the great arcanum. Azoth, Enri, and Tetragrammaton, which are the vestures of the occult philosopher, are like the cloth of Bruges and hogsheads of Guyenne, Florence, gold cloth and Ypres Napri of the poet. In both cases, it is the year 1850 at Sequence in a mask of high fantasy. Moreover, the idle singer of an empty day is paralleled, fairly enough, by the poor and obscure scholar who has recovered the lever of Archimedes. The comparison is intentionally grotesque, but it obtains, notwithstanding, and even admits of, development, for as Mrs. Morris, in a sense, voided the raison d'etre of his poetry, and, in express contradiction to his own mournful question, has endeavored to set the crooked straight by betaking himself to socialism, so Eliphas Levi surrendered the rod of miracles and voided his doctrine of magic by devising a one-sided and insincere concordant with Orthodox religion, and expiring in the arms of my venerable masters in theology, the descendants and decadent, at that, of the imbecile theologians of the Middle Ages. But the one is, as the other was, a man of sufficient ability to make a paradoxical defense of a position which remains untenable. Students of Eliphas Levi will be acquainted with the qualifications and stealthy retractions by which somewhat uncompromising position of initiated superiority in doctrine and ritual has its real significance read out of it by the latter works of the Magus. I have dealt with this point exhaustively in another place. Footnote: see the critical essay prefixed The Mysteries of Magic, a digest of the writings of Eliphas Levi. And there is no call to pass over the same ground a second time. I propose rather to indicate as briefly as possible some new considerations which will help us to understand why there were grave discrepancies between Doctrine and Ritual of Transcendent Magic and the volumes which followed these. In the first place, the earlier books were written more expressly from the standpoint of initiation and in the language thereof. They obviously contain much which it would be mere folly to construe after a literal fashion, and what Eliphas Levi wrote at a later period is not so much discrepant with his earlier instruction, though it is this also, as the qualifications placed by a modern transcendentalist on the technical exaggerations of the secret sciences. For the proof, we need travel no further than the introduction to the Doctrine of Magic, and to the Hebrew manuscript cited therein, as to the powers and privileges of the Magus, and I will point out again, the Hebrew manuscript is meant to deceive. Here, the literal interpretation would be insanity. These claims conceal a secret meaning and are trickery in their verbal sense. They are what Eliphas Levi himself terms hyperbolic, adding, if the sage do not materially and actually perform these things, he accomplishes other which are much greater and more admirable. But this consideration is not in itself sufficient to take account of the issues which are involved. It will not explain, for example, why Eliphas Levi, who consistently teaches in Doctrine and Ritual that the dogmas of so-called revealed religion are nurse tales for children, should subsequently have insisted on their acceptation in the sense of the Orthodox Church by the grown men of science, and it becomes necessary here to touch upon a matter which, by its nature and obviously, does not admit of complete elucidation. The precise period of study which produced the Doctrine and Ritual of Transcendent Magic is, as its first literary result, is not indicated with any certainty, as we have seen, in the life of the author, nor do I regard Eliphas Levi as constitutionally capable of profound or extensive book study. Bruh, I don't know if there's a more, I don't know that there's a more subtle dig that you can have, right? Nor do I regard Eliphas Levi as constitutionally capable of profound or extensive book study, right? This explains this part right here, right? I wasn't going to say it, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. You know why he turned back to the Orthodox Church? Because he was not receiving the results that he thought that he was going to get from doing the magic. That is why he was completely misaligned. I can tell that by the introduction. We don't even have to get into the book. He was completely misunderstood. Like, he completely misunderstood reality. He didn't understand what he was doing. He recorded what other people said, sure, but he was not able to put into practice the things which are true. And I know that because if he had, he could not have turned back to the control system of the Roman Catholic Church. Right? It is too discrepant. There are too many problems, but he found a way to slide right back into that comfort, right? The deception. He lived a life of deception. His whole being was wrapped up in deception, right? From changing his name to joining the monastery to preaching under false pretenses to stealing this child to marry her to, like, all of this is avoidance of responsibility. It is the avoidance of maturity. It is not operating at all underneath the laws of creation. It is obvious why he turned back to religion. Constitutionally capable. I love that. That means he's not possible, right? If you didn't understand that, constitutionally incapable means that you cannot do it. It is not possible. If you are constitutionally incapable of walking, you are in a wheelchair. Back to the text. Intensely suggestive, he is at the same time without much evidence of depth. Splendid in generalization, he is without accuracy in detail, and it would be difficult to cite a worse guide over mere matters of fact. His History of Magic is a case in point. As a philosophical survey, it is admirable, and there is nothing in occult literature to approach it for literary excellence, but it swarms with historical inaccuracies. It is, in all respects, an accomplished and in no way an erudite performance, nor do I think that the writer much concerned himself with any real reading of the authorities whom he cites. Oh my God, this is a smackdown. This is the intro to the book. This is how they introduced the book. This guy is incapable of book thinking. He is in no way an erudite performance, and I think he is much more concerned himself with any reading of the authorities to whom he cites. Smack him in the head a couple times. Yes, indeed. The French verb parcourir represents his method of study, and not the verb approfondir. Let us take one typical case. There is no occult writer whom he cites with more satisfaction and towards whom he exhibits more reverence than William Pastel. In all of Pastel's books there is none which he mentions so often as clavis abscondoratum la constitution mundi. Yet he had read this minute treatise so carelessly that he missed a vital point concerning it and apparently died unaware that the symbolic key prefixed to it was the work of the editor and not the work of Pastel. It does not therefore seem unreasonable to affirm that had Levi been left to himself, he would not have got far in occult science, because his Gallic vivacity would have been blunted too quickly by the horrors of mere research. But he did somehow fall within a circle of initiation which curtailed the necessity for such research, and put him in the right path after making visits to the Bibliothèque Nationale and the Arsenal of only subsidiary importance. This, therefore, constitutes the importance of the Doctrine and Ritual, disguised, indubitably. It is still the voice of initiation. Of what school does not matter, for in this connection nothing can be spoken plainly, and I can only ask the lenience of deferred judgment from my readers for my honorable assurance that I am not speaking idly. The grades of that initiation had only been partly ascended by Eliphas Levi when he published the Doctrine and Ritual, and his publication closed the path of his progress, as he was expelled by Saint Sulpice for the exercise of private judgment in the matters of doctrinal belief. So he was expelled by his occult chiefs for the undue exercise of personal discretion in the matter of the revelation of the mysteries. Now, these facts explain, in the first place, of the importance, as I have said, of the doctrine and ritual, because it represents a knowledge which cannot be derived from books. They explain, secondly, the shortcomings of that work, because it is not the result of a full knowledge. Why, thirdly, the latter writings contain no evidence of further knowledge, and lastly, I think that they materially assist us to understand why there are retractions, qualifications, and subterfuges in the said later works. Having gone too far, he naturally attempted to go back, and just as he strove to patch up a species of modus vivendi with the church of his childhood, so he endeavored, by throwing dust in the eyes of his readers, to make his peace with that initiation, the first law of which he had indubitably violated. In both cases, and quite naturally, he failed. It remains for me to state what I feel personally to be the chief limitation of Levi, namely, that he was a transcendentalist, but not a mystic, and indeed, he was scarcely a transcendentalist in the accepted sense, for he was fundamentally a materialist, moreover, who at times approached perilously towards atheism, as when he states that God is a hypothesis which is very probably necessary. He was, moreover, a disbeliever in any real communication with the world of spirits. Okay, I'm going to hit on this because I have opened myself up to the world of spirits. I have had no takers. I have had an angelic experience. I have had a couple of spiritual experiences outside of angelic experience, right? I was taken out of my body into a divine revelatory experience where I didn't see any entities. I felt the comfort of being held as I watched creation unfold, and I saw all of the intricacies and the interweaving. Right? That was when I lost racism. That was when I had many spiritual insights. Right? None of that required there to be some visible entity that I called upon. Right? I didn't ask for the Archangel Michael. I didn't ask for Lucifer. I didn't ask for anybody. God gave me what I needed without me even really asking for it. I was seeking, but I didn't even know what to ask for, and I received it. There may be communication with the world of spirits. You should be exceedingly careful if you are attempting to do so, because there are entities. I absolutely believe that. I have experienced it, not willfully. Right? I've never called one in. There are entities who are aligned with the betterment of humankind, and there are entities aligned with the detriment of humankind, direct tempters and deceivers. They can directly deceive you. They can imitate the entities aligned with the betterment of humankind. They can lie to you. It is almost certain that any control method that is in print is going to be wrong. Right? It is possible that they are correct. It is much more likely that they are wrong. That instead of giving you the accurate way to contain themselves, they give you a way which will work. Right? Be exceedingly careful if you deal with spirits. I'm not telling you not to. I believe that they are out there, and I believe that there are those that are aligned with the betterment of humankind. You just need to be exceedingly careful when making that determination. Be sure that the fruits of the labors will bear out the fruits of benefit. Back to the text. He defines mysticism as the shadow and the buffer of intellectual light, and loses no opportunity to enlarge upon its false illuminism, its excesses, and its fatuities. There is, therefore, no way from man to God in his system, while the sole avenues of influx from God to man are sacramentally, and in virtue of a tolerable hypothesis. Thus, man must remain in simple intellectualism if he would rest in reason. The sphere of the material experience is that of his knowledge, and, as to all beyond it, there are only the presumptions of analogy. I submit that this is not the doctrine of occult science, nor the summum bonum of the greater initiation. The transcendental pneumatology is more by its own hypotheses than an alphabetical system, argued Kabbalistically, yes, and that more than mere memories can, on the same assumption, be evoked in the astral light. The hierarchic order of the visible world has its complement in the invisible hierarchy, which analogy leads us to discern, being at the same time a process of our perception rather than a rigid law governing the modes of manifestation in all things seen and unseen. Initiation takes us to the bottom step of the ladder of the invisible hierarchy and instructs us in the principles of ascent, but the ascent rests personally within ourselves. I will make sure, I think I mentioned it before, but I will point it out again. I have not been initiated into any earthly club. And not the Masons, the Freemasons, or the Rosicrucians, or any of those clubs. I am not a member. I owe no allegiance to any of these initiatory things. Now, I do claim an initiation. It was a spiritual indoctrination into the order of Melchizedek, but I cannot confer any special privileges to anyone else. I cannot initiate anyone else. That is not what I am meant to do, right? I am not here for that. It appears to be something for me. I have to be honest about it, but really there's not a whole lot even to describe about it. It appears to be about bringing the truth, discerning the various things that are true and not. That appears to be an intrinsic part of it, and so I do point out that I have an initiation, but it is an entirely spiritual experience, which gives no earthly authority, and I cannot give any initiations, right? I'm not forming a club. I'm not seeking a club. I'm not trying to do any of that. Now, we have a crew. We have people seeking knowledge. That's as close to a club as I'm going to get, right? Me and the crew are aligned with seeking knowledge. Well, there is no initiation other than prayer, fasting, and meditation in anything that I do. Back to the text. The voices of some who have proceeded can be heard above us, but they are of those who are still upon the way, and they die as they rise into the silence towards which we must also ascend alone, where initiation can no longer help us unto that bourne from whence no traveler returns, and the influxes are sacramental only to those who are below. An annotated translation exceeded the scope of the present undertaking, but there is much in the text which follows that offers scope for detailed criticism. We are going to do that. That's what we are about to do. And there are points, also, where further elucidation would be useful, and that is also something that we are going to do. I am here to give out as freely and as clearly as I possibly can the steps by which I have taken to reach adeptship. Right? I don't claim to be a master, but I am definitely not a novice. I am fully engrossed in this. I am fully engaged in this. I am fully committed to this. And I can do it. And so I will be elucidating. I will be saying, yes, this works. And the worst I am going to say is, in my experience, this doesn't work, or that this is on its face incorrect. Right? Those are the two criticisms that I'm going to offer. I cannot tell you if this works because it's not the same way that I did it, or this is absolutely not correct. One of the most obvious defects, the result of mere casual carelessness or undue haste in writing, is the promise to explain or to prove given points later on, which are forgotten subsequently by the author. That's why I do this in the form of studies, is because I forget stuff, right? And these books, these stories, these accounts bring the topic forward so that we can discuss it. Now, that's not the format for everybody. A lot of people don't like the fact that I talk so much of my own knowledge, and I'm fine with you not being here. Instances will be found on page 65 concerning the method of determining the appearance of unborn children by means of the pentagram. On page 83, concerning the rules for the recognition of sex in the astral body. On page 97, concerning the notary art. On page 100, concerning the magical side of the exercises of St. Ignatius. On page 123, concerning the alleged sorcery of Grandier and Garrard. And on page 125, concerning Schroepfer's secrets and formulas for evocation. On page 134, concerning the occult iconography of Gaffarel. In some cases, the promised elucidations appear in other places than those indicated, but they are mostly wanting altogether. There are other perplexities with which the reader must deal according to his judgment. The explanation of the quadrature of the circle on page 37 is a childish folly. The illustration of perpetual motion on page 55 involves a mechanical absurdity. The doctrine of the perpetuation of the same physiognomies from generation to generation is not less absurd in heredity. The cause assigned to cholera and other ravaging epidemics, more especially the reference to bacteria, seems equally outrageous in physics. There is one other matter to which attention should be directed. The Hebrew quotations in the original, and the observation applies generally to all the works of Levi, swarm with typographical and other errors, some of which it is impossible to correct, as, for example, the passage cited from Rabbi Abraham on page 266. So also the Greek conjuration, page 277 and 278, is simply untranslatable as it stands, and the version given is not only highly conjectural, but omits an entire passage owing to insuperable difficulties. Lastly, after careful consideration, I have judged it the wiser course to leave out the preliminary essay which was prefixed to the second edition of the Doctrine and Ritual. Its prophetic utterances upon the mission of Napoleon III have been stultified by subsequent events. It is devoid of any connection with the work which it precedes, and representing as it does the later views of Levi, it would be a source of confusion to the reader. The present translation represents, therefore, the first edition of the Dogma et Ritual de la Haute Magie, omitting nothing but a few unimportant citations from old French grimoires in an unnecessary appendix at the end. The portrait of Levi is from a carte de visite in the possession of Mr. Edward Maitland, and was issued with his Life of Anna Kingsford a few months ago. London, September 1896. And that is going to wrap up the biographical introduction. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult series of topics. I understand I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relate those. It is not intentional, but it is not something that I apologize for. I really was not expecting this introduction. Like, I don't read these prior to us doing them together, right? I've never read through Dogma and Ritual. I thought it was a Freemason manual, right, for years. I really did not understand what this was. This is brand new information to me. I knew the name Eliphas Levi. I never even associated the two, right, the book and the hymn together. I really did think it was a Mason thing. I was not expecting Mr. White to give us so much elucidation. Generally speaking, when you see something like this, it is by someone who was friendly, right? Apparently that was not the case here. Me and Mr. White would probably be aligned on a lot of things, because I do fully intend to call out the bullshit in this. In the exact same way that I called out the bullshit in the Bible. In the exact same way that I called out the bullshit in Fragments of a Faith Forgotten, or any of Mrs. Blavatsy's works, or any of the various things that we have covered so often in so many playlists. I step on toes because I want to give you the best information I can. I want you to be able to do what I did. I fully believe that you can. Anything I can do, you can do better. You can do anything better than me. I believe that, right? I am just a mortal man. I do fast. I do pray. I do meditate. That's what sets me apart. It is the actual physical application of the concepts which led me to where I am. I asked for healing. I received how to heal. I asked for healing. I received how to manipulate the forces of creation. And I gave it out, right? It's free in the Infinite Integrations playlist. It is free in the Esoterica playlist. It is for purchase in my book. It is for purchase for the members, where I read the book to you. You can spend a little bit of money and gain the knowledge. That is the only gateway, right? If you can't spend $20 for a little bit of knowledge, then you probably don't want it. If you can't spend $5 for it for the playlist, you don't really want the knowledge, and that's fine. Not everybody does. I am fine with that. Not everybody wants to spend money. I'm fine with that too. You just got to dig it out, right? The infinite integration. There's nothing contained in the book that's not in the book in the playlist. It's just more hidden in the playlist. I have compiled it as briefly and succinctly as possible. I didn't put in a whole lot of filler words. I didn't bring in references from the Middle Ages. I talked about the things that I know. I talked about my journey, right? I talked about the things I learned on my journey, and then I talked about the effects I got from the things I learned on my journey. And then I gave instructions on how you can do it yourself. It's only 8 chapters. It's like 25,000 words. You can read it in 2.5 hours. But it's got a lot of knowledge in there. And all of it is practically applicable. You can test any of it yourself and see whether it holds up or not. Maybe I'm wrong. I am perfectly fine with being corrected. The things that I talk about so firmly, I remain as speculation. My divine revelations, right? I believe it fully and wholeheartedly. But you don't. Why would you? It's not your revelation. It was revealed to me. I can't give you the experience, but I can relay the knowledge. And it's up to you whether you want to take that knowledge and cultivate it, to fertilize it, to get the tree of knowledge to grow within you. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment. If you agree or disagree with anything that was stated, put it in the box down below. And if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there's another work you would like to see me read or discuss in the manner that we are doing here, drop that in the box as well. And if you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of my book. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.